Jake from Canine Optimal Training Solutions. Here to discuss today about some e-collar training. E-collar training is kind of one of those things that's taken off after a while, right? Obviously, they've come a long way, but it's fairly popular form of training now. And I just want to kind of go over a few things, maybe how I do it. I'm not saying it's the only way. It's the way I typically do it. But I like to condition e-collars first, right? So part of my process, the first thing I discuss is I just want the dog to get used to wearing the collar, right? A lot of the times you see dogs that get them put on and they start acting kind of timid already. The ears are back every time it's on. They almost shut down sometimes. And a lot of it's done because they haven't conditioned well enough at the beginning, right? So we put the collar on. Everybody's like, all right, let's slap this thing on and start, shocking them every time they're doing something. And it's like, well, okay, there's a process here, right? Force-free world out there is going to basically tell you that's how it's done, and that's why they're abusing the dogs. Blah 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 blah. Anyway, the way I do it, my dog, I put it on. I let my dog wear it around for a week, maybe a week and a half, two, depends on the dog, right? I don't even turn it on. Put it on the dog, let it wear around. Typically, if I have a dog, so like if I'm training one here for a board and train, every time I pull that dog out to train, it's getting the e-collar put on along with its other training tool, with all any other training stuff. It's getting treats, and I do use some positive reinforcement, right? So it's getting all those things with the collar on. The collar is just being associated as part of the process of being pulled out and put into this training scenario, and the dog has fun. If I pull the dog out just to kind of run them around and let them, and have some fun, maybe play some fetch, I'll put it on them. I'm trying to associate it with kind of normal fun things for the dog. That way I can avoid having a situation later where they're like, man, every time this thing gets put on me, it sucks, right? So eventually when I think the dog's ready, I'll go ahead and we're going to start with a very low level tone. A lot of different e-collars out there. Personally speaking, I use the educators. I'll start them at very low levels. I'm just giving the dog a couple nicks. All I'm really looking for is some response from the dog that they're feeling something. I don't need the dog to yelp. I don't need it to panic, really. I don't need it to be like this overwhelming thing, right? I press the button, and all I'm looking for is kind of like that. What's that, right? If I get that, I use that as kind of my training level, if you will, right? So I always tell everybody there's times that we're using the e-collar as to reach out and kind of tap the dog on the shoulder, right? Maybe the dog's in auditorial exclusion. It's over there smelling some stuff. You're not able to, you're calling the dog, he's not even looking at you, right? So that little tap can be enough sometimes to get the dog's attention and then be able to give him a command, right? Now, as we go through the process, at some point I find a level that I consider a correction level. This is a level that's going to be mildly uncomfortable for the dog. When I press it, I want the dog to be like, ooh, I didn't really like that. I want to kind of avoid that. So that I can help them learn the behaviors that are not good as well. So I don't typically use tone unless I'm pairing the tone with a specific command, but other than that, I don't usually use tone. A lot of people ask me why. I think it's unnecessary for the most part. I think there's better options. I get a lot of people that come in here and they're like, oh, well, my dog, I put it on, I only have to use the tone to get him to stop. Cool. What if you didn't have to use it at all? What if they just didn't do the behavior? Isn't that kind of the goal? Like the goal isn't to see the dog do the behavior once and then have to press something to stop them every time, right? The goal is they don't do it. That's the goal, right? I mean, so tone has become like this acceptable thing that people feel they feel better about doing because they're not giving their dog quote unquote shock. I'm going to use the term shock. I really don't like that term for what's actually happening, but for lack of better terms, we'll use that, right? So they're worried about shocking the dog. They have this fear of hurting the dog, so they're unsure of it. So they're like, well, tone feels better. Well, here's the thing, right? Sometimes my dog's going to have to get a little uncomfortable to learn that the behavior is unacceptable so that they don't do the behavior. And I always explain to everybody, think of that behavior being, what if my dog's running towards the road after a rabbit, right? All of a sudden, a car could hit him. Now, I'm not a vet, but I'm just going to go ahead and assume that the damage that the car could potentially do to my dog will far outweigh the damage that the e-collar could do to my dog. Hands down, right? So two terrible situations could take place, right? My dog could die. I don't want that. I love my dog. Or I'm spending thousands of dollars to try to save my dog's life when I could have just been okay with giving them a little bit of discomfort to teach them never to run towards the road in the first place, right? So we get stuck with this tone idea, and I tell everybody, like, here's the problem. A lot of the times, and I've seen people do this in a class of mine before. The dogs are barking, you hear the tone, they tone the dog stops barking for a second, right? The dog's looking around like, what the hell is that noise? And what's it do? It goes back to the behavior. All right, they tone it again, dog stops. Goes back to the behavior. And they're like, well, see, it stops them. Well, it doesn't stop them because they're like, oh, I shouldn't bark because I'm hearing this tone. No, it stops them because it's a distraction, right? It's like if I'm sitting here having a conversation with somebody and all of a sudden there's a loud boom, I'm going to be like, the hell was that? You know, I'm going to then, if I don't see anything that looks alarming, I'm probably going to go back to my conversation, right? Because it's just a distraction real fast is all it really is. Or the second part is there's I can tone the dog and then I shock them, right? There's that classification that we've done. The typical, and this is something I learned when I first got into e-collars, right, was tone the dog, then shock them. And the tone's the warning, so they know the shock's coming. So eventually, you just have to tone them. And again, like I was bringing up, that means I'm telling my dog that they can do the behavior once, right? I don't want them to do it once. I don't ever want them to do it. I want to get to the point that my dog just stops doing the behaviors I don't want them to do. Not because I told them not to, but just simply they just don't do it, right? That process can really hinder your ability to ever actually get your dog off an e-collar if that's something you want to do. Me personally, I have a dog that I live on about 6.5 acres. He runs around outside with me, no collars on at all. I started that process with an e-collar, and eventually I just took it off him and tried something, right? He just doesn't do the behaviors that he's not supposed to, and I'm able to call him back because he doesn't know different. That's just what we've always done, right? So I don't need the e-collar. Well, if he only knew to stop doing certain behaviors because he heard a tone on this collar, how would I get him to the point of just not doing them, right? So all of a sudden, if my dog's waiting to hear the tone to say, hey, don't do that anymore, and then they're out running around doing something and they start digging a hole, we'll say, right? And now I'm like, oh shoot, I don't have a tone. I don't have a collar on him to hit the tone button. How is he supposed to stop? Sure, I can yell at him, but I still have a hole in my yard, right? Even if it just started, I still have a hole in my yard, Or maybe then the dog starts realizing, oh, I'll dig when dad doesn't see me. So I basically, I'd rather just eliminate that, right? So the way I do that is I use that correction level. Dog goes to do the behavior, they're just getting the correction. Plain and simple, right? So as soon as the behavior takes place, the correction then follows up. And the dog, ooh, didn't like that. And we're getting the dog in that mindset and cycle of, I want to avoid this correction that's taking place. I want to avoid that. How do I do that? Well, if the behavior they do is always leading to that correction, they're going to want to stop the behavior to see if that avoids the correction. So that's kind of the way I do it. Again, I'm not saying it's the only way. It's the way I have found that works very well. I condition a lot of dogs to e-collars. I've cycled dogs off of e-collars before. It's a process. Sure, it takes time. I'm not going to say you put the e-collar on the dog for 2 weeks and bam, you can take it right off. That's just not how that works. Like the time depends on the dog. Depends on your consistency with everything, right? Like e-collars are not the end all be all here either. Like don't get in the mindset that, oh, e-collar train my dog and then bam, I'm good to go. Well, there's so much more to this. This is just a topic I wanted to discuss because I'm getting more and more people come in and telling me how, they're able to just use the tone for their dog, and it's great. I'm happy for them that they don't have to correct their dog all the time, but at the end of the day, they're not really stopping behaviors either. Um, they're still allowing the dog to do something that it shouldn't do, and again, sometimes it's a safety thing, right? I don't want my dog running towards the road. My dog likes to chase rabbits. He's a Malinois, right? Got some prey drive. He's caught a few in my backyard. So I need to be able to call him off those rabbits sometimes, right? So this is kind of the process to start that. Um, anyway, I hope that helps. Anybody that's interested in the e-collars and stuff like that, and if you're not sure of where to go from here, um, feel free to reach out. I'd be more than happy to have a discussion. I'm sure there's plenty of good trainers. There's plenty of good trainers all over the country. Here in the U.S. So anywhere you're at, if you can find a good one, go for it. Reach out to them, ask them about it, start asking questions. What collars do they use? What's their recommendations on collars? What's their process like, right? I know people ask me about recommendations on collars all the time. One of the things I typically look for is I want one with more levels, right? Mine has about 100 levels on it. I like that. The way I kind of explain that to everybody, because it sounds really scary, is your 100 level, so your top level on a 100 level collar is about the same intensity as a 10 on a 10 level collar. The only difference is I get smaller increments to work with, right? So I can find a working level and a correction level and play with both. So anyway, thanks. I hope that helps everybody. Like, subscribe, all that fun stuff.